Well, this looks more like what I set up, but now I'm wondering if I have messed up all the participants, if there are any anymore. Okay. Musical Zoom today. I'm not sure what happened, guys, but here we all are. And thank you for attending, everybody. I'm sorry about this. Hey, we're going to start this whole thing with inside the audit room. And we have wonderful, wonderful panelists today to talk about CMMC and trying not to act a little frazzled at clicking start with Zoom webinars twice and being on the wrong meeting twice. So anyways, welcome John Riley from
Thank you very much.
Omnistruct.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And Eric Levitas, so nice to have you from Control Case. This is awesome. There's been a ton going on with regard to CMMC. A lot of information is running around that can be debunked, not debunked, is real and valid. And so we're seeing a lot of sort of strange stories, but we're also seeing some very interesting stories at the same time. So Eric, I would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit and tell our guests a little bit about what they're seeing, what you've been seeing, and then we'll have John Riley do the same thing as we kick this off.
All good. No, pleasure. Thank you guys for having me. I look forward to the discussion. I know John, myself, you, Valerie, we've talked about this a bunch, and I feel like all day I've been talking about this. Every day of my life, I dream about CMMC. So I'm Eric. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Control Case. We are one of those crazy C3PAOs, one of the 70-ish that are out there. We audit and certify against everything, right? ISO, SOC, FedRAMP, CMMC. So I live, die, and breathe. Assessment, certification, you name it, I'm a part of it. You know, this whole CMMC topic I've been a part of for years. I know I am young, but I've got lucky to get in. Lucky is the wrong word. I got positioned in the CMMC ecosystem early. I've worked for RPOs, C3PAOs, ATPs, APPs that they're called now. So I've been a part of the block, the whole full life cycle of CMMC. I take this stuff very seriously, and my intention is to hopefully debunk a lot of the craziness that's out there, or validate if in fact you have a question of questioning something that's legitimate. So I look forward to this discussion. I love this stuff, and I'm hopeful that the community as a whole takes this stuff seriously, because it is a serious topic.
Yes, and it has been interesting conversations with you, Eric, about this. And it is a very serious topic. So thank you for that introduction. And then John Riley, Omnistruct.
Hello, everybody. I'm John Riley. If you haven't met me before, yeah, you know, I'm always here, right? I'm obviously much older than Eric and have the beard to prove it, and the white hairs. So, but just like Eric, I've been around the block a few times when it comes to the audits, as well as been doing compliance for too long to count. So, some of the first audits we did were for like state of Wyoming, and different organizations when they needed audits. But really now we focus more on preparing companies for their audits, trying to build their cybersecurity programs and understand how CMMC or any of these programs are going to work in their environment and their culture. It's been an interesting journey watching companies take on this endeavor to become compliant, and trying to get engineers to understand the need for it, as well as just moving things forward. So as far as CMMC and keeping data sacred, that is one of our pillars of truth here, is making sure that the data stays where it's supposed to be. So again, I'm John Riley.
And I am your moderator. I don't really need to have an introduction because I'm going to be the one that talks the least in this. I would love to sort of turn this over to our panelists. But one of the questions that I always hear from organizations is, why the heck do we need to do this now? And then after that question, why the heck now? What are the real reasons I mean, real reasons. The whole concept is the real reasons that DIB contractors are failing this right now. And sometimes it can be very, very simple things that you could change. But just like Eric said, it's a very serious topic. And so let's turn it over to you two to talk about the why really quickly, because we want to get into the audit room and we want to have some use cases and share some ideas around why the DIB is failing right now. And winning.
Yeah.
Some are winning. We know that.
Yeah, John, if you do, I can kind of open it up, and if you want to fill in the gaps, I mean,
Sure, let's go for it.
biggest thing is this. Again, if this conversation was 12 months ago, this is a different conversation, right? CMMC is real. 32 CFR got launched in December. CMMC is real. There is no, I've again been around the block for enough to know that, the conversation of when, it was a real conversation that people knew that the can was being kicked and people were making decisions because of it. Can is no longer kicked. I think as of right now, and I just had this discussion earlier today, with 48 CFR looming to be released, just remember that prime contractors can do whatever they want. It's a commercial contract, right? So I'm seeing right now, regardless of 48 CFR coming out and issuing this down this whole, authorization path where they're going to have time-bound requirements and whatever, I'm seeing right now clients call me and say, hey, Eric, can I get a assessed next week? And I'm like, no, that's not how our timeline works. It's a process. I'm like, why are you asking? And they're like, oh, I have a prime contractor that said I can't bid on their contract unless I show a level 2 certification. And to me, they're like, can they do that? I'm like, yeah, they can, right? So the question of like getting ready now, just remember this. There's 60, 70 C3PAOs. Of those 60, 70 C3PAOs, only a handful are actually doing assessments. Some have used it kind of as a showcase to validate the other work that they do, to say, look, I can help you get ready. And I got my C3PO to do it, but I'm not doing assessments. So that pile of C3POs are even smaller. I know C3POs that are booking into next year, end of this year. They're ever, the C3POs are ever coming onto the market. But if you push away the entire process of getting ready, which is its own potential 12-month process, money, funding, people, resources, just to get into a queue with an assessor is a multi-month process. So now if you add all of that together and you're trying to get a part of these contracts as 48 CFR is coming and primes are doing their own crazy things, you are behind. And I know everybody talks about it, but I'm like actively watching it happen in real time when people's faces go, oh man, I can't bid on that contract. I'm like, I don't know a C3PO that can, there's a process we have to follow, a multi-phase process. You have to submit documentation. I have to review it. That can't happen overnight. There's a whole process we are required to follow. So yeah, I don't think you can bid on that unless you could find somebody that can do otherwise. So there is a real conversation of, you need to be having these open dialogues with your contractors, with your primes, with your suppliers, because if you're not, it's going to hit you and you're going to go, it's all good. I can get ready quickly. And even if you can somehow buy something that gets you ready quickly, there's still the conversation of getting into somebody's queue and getting assessed. And those are pieces people are missing. So getting ready now is a more important conversation than it's ever been before. And this is like the most exciting time in the CMMC world because this stuff is a reality, but the scariest time at the same time, because there is so much to do and so much time investment and money investment that needs to be taken into consideration earlier rather than later. John, I don't know if you had thoughts on that, things to add.
The thing I want to add to that is the reason that we're here. I mean, what happened is we had FedRAMP, we had a number of things where we had self-attestation of a lot of these DIB contractors. And what happened is that as much as they said that they were doing, it was a paper check box for them. I mean, they literally were going through and saying, yes, I've got this, yes, I've got this. And then you turn around and they, take their classified information and toss it in their trash can at the local area, right? I mean, there was so much, there were so many things that were being just avoided, or they came up and said, we've got to come up with a different way of doing this, and not just take somebody's word for it anymore. And so that was part of the reason for the CMMC's birth. So now we're in a situation where these contractors have been living this lifestyle where they're saying, it's a paper cert. All I got to do is do a checkbox, and nobody's going to really come check. And that's not the case anymore. And as Eric was talking, they're going to find that there's a complete process. Plus, you have to be ready. You have to actually have documentation. You actually have to prove that you're doing this, not just for the audit. If you're just doing this to try and do this for the audit, you're going to fail. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. So anyways, that's
Yeah, don't spoil it, John.
sorry, go ahead. So that's why we're here. That's why CMMC is important, is because there is no self-attestation for level 2. If you're actually getting that data, you have to be ready. You have to culturally be ready, and it's a game changer.
You know, it's so interesting that both of you talked about this, because I feel a little bit like this was a bit of some crying wolf. So people were like, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And then, yes, in our technology as it stands today, we're so accustomed to finding another way around something, or push a button on a microwave, that we pop out and pass an assessment, that it was like, people would just say, yeah, well, we'll get there when we get there. And the revenue component with the contracts were quite a big deal. So, yeah, let's get to the crux of all of this. We know that it is now in the contracts, and there's about, I guess, last estimate, there was about 200,000 that had to actually pass an ML2. I'm sorry, ML2, level 2. I always say that, maturity level 2. Anyways, and I guess at the end of the day, let's get to the crux of some reasons why they, other than not being prepped at all, right? Reasons why they are not inside the audit room, reasons why they're not passing these audits. What exactly are organizations doing that you're seeing that they're not passing this?
Yeah, John, you want to open this one up?
Sure. Well, one of the big things that we're finding when we're talking to customers, I alluded to it earlier, right? They haven't taken it seriously. They think that this is just a one time, we can throw something together, and the auditor is not really going to look at the data that we're going to give them. The goal here is to show that you're meeting all of the controls, that you actually have the procedures in place to continue with those, and they're gonna ask, show me how you're doing this, and the more that you have to go back and go through that, the longer your audit's going to take, or they're just going to be like, fail, you didn't provide this. So it's really a matter of trying to prepare all of your controls, your proof, and getting things ready for them, so that you're not having to look, you're not having to get things ready, you're not having to prepare anything. You can't fix things as the auditor's asking. So you've got to have that preparation, and to go. You got to be ready to go when it happens.
Yeah, I mean, I could, I can be on this call all day and kind of sift through the whys. And look, I just want to be very clear, and we've talked about this as a group. Like, it's less failing and more not readiness, and more lack of showing the right information for the assessor to even get you down the process of passing or failing. There are certainly folks that have failed. There are certainly folks that will fail. There's a whole different discussion to have of not even being ready. And the one thing I wanted to share from the assessor's perspective, remember, there's a process they have to follow. It's the CMMC assessment process. This is not like they get in there and just make up their minds on what they're going to assess and how they're going to assess it. They are told control by control, objective by objective, what to interview, what to validate, right? There's a whole process they follow. So there's no surprise when that assessor comes in there and goes, well, I need to see this piece of evidence. You're like, what? It's like, it's right here. It's, it's asking me to ask you whether I'm the most senior assessor or junior assessor. They all follow the same process. Now, how they validate and how they review and what they deem as acceptable or not, is still a crapshoot. And we know that's a real thing in community, is everybody's accepting things differently, which I hope changes, because I want there to be uniformity around CMMC. how you get compliant is different, but what compliance looks like should be somewhat the same. But just remember, like, they are in this process and they have, like, as an assessor and even as a lead CCA and a CCP, and the CCA is on the team, and again, has to be a certain number of folks on the team, they get assessed. And as a C3PO, we get assessed for our work. So like, we take it pretty seriously, following the rules, following the process. And again, when we're doing these assessments, and that's what we're seeing is like, folks are like baffled. They're like, what? You need to see that? It's like, yeah, here's the rule. It's asking for it right here. Right. So, and I want to get into more depth in this discussion of like, what are those things? Right. That's the point of this. But like, at the highest level, there is a shock factor when the assessor goes, awesome. Yeah. Just, if you could share all your customer responsibilities matrices and your shared responsibilities matrices, and like, hey, if we can get that like asset categorization, they're like, what's that? And I'm like, that's a problem. I don't know if you're ready. And maybe you need to get in front of somebody, or maybe you need to do a mock assessment, because those are things like, there's a real conversation to be had of like, it's like you're in a play. You want to practice the play. Like if you got in front of the play, in front of the audience, and you're like, I don't know my lines. I don't know where to stand. I don't know when the shade is supposed to drop. I know people in the community teach classes on just how to be a part of the assessment. There's a whole component of just knowing when it's your time to talk, knowing when it's time to be quiet, and knowing when it's, hey, if you could show me that evidence, and you're like, oh my God, I have no idea where that evidence is. That's a problem, right? So again, at its most basic core, we'll get into the nitty gritty. Be prepared, because it's out, the information is out there, what the assessors are going to ask for in the assessment process. It's all written down. There is no surprise, but we still see that it's a huge surprise to people.
It's odd that there's test prep for it, and then you get into the test and you're like, almost like multiple choice, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't remember everything. And it's like, well, did you prepare for it? Because we went through all the material and now you're here. And I mean, it's no different than when it is a little different, but when the IRS audits you, right, you've got to have all the documents ready to go, and they're going to ask you very specific questions. So let's do that. Let's get inside the audit room and let's kind of talk about a mock assessment between Eric and John, maybe even role play a little bit with that audit. What are some of the things that you as an auditor would be asking, and why are they not able to produce?
Yeah. I'll just say this real quick, because I was talking a lot on the last question. I'm gonna pass this one to John, but and these are reasons we have partners like John's team and Valerie's team, right? Because it is really important to have the right readiness partner, so that when a C3PA like myself comes in, the first three questions I'm going to ask you, and I want to get, John, your take on like how you respond to these, and like, tell me about your external service providers. And I want you to like, who are they, right? Are they SPAs? Are they CUI assets? How many? Do you have are they FedRAMP? Are they not? Do you have the CRMs, the SRMs? Like, is that readily available, and can you quantify it? And then I want to know about your IT infrastructure. Are you cloud? Are you hybrid? Are you on-prem? The CUI, does it get printed? Is it in a server? And then I ultimately want to know, is this an enclave environment? Like, plus, are you in VDI? Do you have an MSP? Is this like a VDI plus MSP? Is this non-VDI? Is this like enterprise-wide? Those are like top three questions before I get into like, how many employees, how many locations, like just like the nitty gritty. Those are the three questions that either validate readiness or push me to do like a mock assessment. And those are probably the number one things during these assessments that we push people to do this mock, to make sure that those three things are accounted for, which is basically scope, like scope. That is, so John, I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but like from a C3PO, those are the first three things I ask. And
Yeah, I mean,
that's what I want to validate.
And that is, I mean, that is what we're trying to teach people as well. I mean, there's the scope of it, but it's and then it's the preparation. I mean, so what are you trying to protect? I mean, how are you going to receive this data? Where is it going to go? Who has access to it? Where's, let's define these items before we even start going down this path as far as getting you ready. if you've got a 5,000 person organization, is it going to be 100 people that are going to have access, or is it going to be all 5,000? How are you going to control it? If it's going to be an enclave, great. Then how, do you have the enclave set up? Is it, is it certified? I mean, one of the things that we've seen a number of times now is that, a company will say, oh yeah, we're certified to be an enclave. And then it comes down to the auditor coming out, and we find out that they're not. They're not FedRAMP. They're not certified. They're maybe pending, or they're maybe doing something else. So we really need to kind of check those service providers. Check and make sure, find out before you get to the audit point to see, uh, uh, you know, show me your certification. I mean, I want to know that it's there. So that's one of the bigger things that we see coming into this is as Eric said, check your service providers, no matter where they're at, and understand your responsibilities. This is not something where you just drop it on your technical people and go, here, go figure this out. This is an organizational understanding of who's going to be doing it, and who, where, and when, right? So you absolutely
But how do they check their service provider? Because that is one thing I've seen in the industry where I have actually had service providers say they are, like you alluded to. And maybe that's a question that people on the session want to know too. But there's been a lot of strange stuff going on that people will say, yes, we are. And you're like trying to validate that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that ticks me off because that happens all the time.
Yeah, I was actually
right
gonna
now.
stop. I was gonna tell John to let's pin this, because what you just said is, so first off, Valerie, anybody saying that and aren't, let me know. They should be reported immediately. I won't report them, but they should be reported. Somebody should report them. There's two ways to validate your service provider. There's the community that holds their level 2 certifications. That's one validation point, right? So I'm seeing cloud service providers get their level 2. I'm seeing managed service providers get their level 2. If your external service providers do not store, process, or transmit CUI, they are not required to have FedRAMP. It's a good to have, right? If you're classify them as a security protection asset, if they are never acting and never storing, processing, or transmitting CUI, a level 2 is also a good to have, but not a requirement. They at most need to make sure that they align to 800-171 for the applicable controls, that they've documented in either a CRM or an SRM, and ultimately that they're available to have a discussion about it if need be. So, and the other piece to this is just because you have your level 2, that only covers your internal network, right? So when the assessor, there's also the nuance of hey, I'm level 2 certified, I'm an MSP, you're good, client, just use me, you're good. No, that covers them, and it's a good to have. So the assessor doesn't have to go validate their internal network, but this assessor still has to validate and verify everything that's shared. So if the MSP is managing X, that still needs to be verified and validated, interviewed, whatever the assessor has to do in that. So in that point, how do you ask for a level 2? You ask for it. Right now, I don't think there's a website that shows who's level 2 and who's not. There is a community. I think the Summit 7 folks, there's an MSP conglomerate. I forgot what they're called, but they're listing all the MSPs that hold level 2 certifications, which I think is great. But I don't believe there's a website that shows level 2 MSPs, because who knows who's going to hack that information and steal it. And, that's how they find their way to the DIB. But the other piece of this is, if your cloud service provider stores, processes, or transmits CUI, FedRAMP Marketplace, they need to be FedRAMP. And you said it, Valerie, or John said it, just because they're telling you they're getting it or it's in process or whatever, that doesn't mean anything. It means they're taking the right steps, which is beautiful. We love people, taking ownership. But until they can produce you their SAR, their SAP, the Appendix J, you could see them on the marketplace. The assessor just can't be oh, good, they have their RAR done, they'll get assessed in the next year, we're good, we'll accept it. No, yeah. Does not be accepted. So asking your cloud service providers about their timelines, when will you have the SAR and SAP, when will you be listed on the marketplace, what are your timelines? Because that, again, what I've seen, it's the assessor cannot just at face value be well, they're getting it. That doesn't mean anything to the assessor.
Yeah. And we do have a question from Chris. How do you map out shared responsibility amongst different service providers?
I was responding to him at the time, but so I said, create, create your documentation for each control, and in that there needs to be some, where there's shared responsibility. Look, I mean, there's great programs that allow you to say, here's the thing, but who's going to be the one that actually does the patch management? What happens if the new patch is out? Who tests it before it gets out there? Who installs it? Who's responsible for doing those things to meet that specific control? Look, that's where the shared responsibilities come in. If the data is being stored in a cloud service provider and they're saying that they're encrypting all that data and everything's being encrypted within that location, then that document needs to be shared to your control, that control is being met by your CSP, and that here's their document that says how they've done it. That whole chain of items and that level of responsibility. That's where that data comes from.
And I'll share what I've seen. So there's two answers to this in my mind. You reach out to your external service provider and request it. Blanket statement. Do you have an SRM? Do you have a CRM? I would ask. They're either going to say, yeah, absolutely. Here, let me show you. And then at that point, everything John just said is like 1,000, right? Like you then need to take that document you need to do something with that, right? Because they're managing certain things for you. You need to make sure that kind of seamlessly integrates into your SSP seamlessly, and you're able to talk about you versus them. Because remember, it's all about responsibility. So when the assessor comes in and you go, not me, that's my MSP, here's the documentation to prove it, there's a and then what, right? So then we have to validate and verify, right? So there's that piece of it. Assuming that your ESP has documentation, ask for it, include it in your system security plan. The more the merrier, right? Make sure it's easy for the assessor to gain access to. The other piece of this is, what if they don't have it? What if your external service provider doesn't have one, but maybe they have they hold a PCI cert, or they hold a SOC 2? Like that doesn't let you off the hook. You can't just say, well, they didn't give it to me, I don't have it. That's not a good answer. You have to then go in and create it and work with them. So we've had some clients do what John said and start to map it control by control, objective by objective, for what they're responsible for, and then seamlessly integrating that into their system security plan and seamlessly integrating that into the conversation that they have with the assessors. So again, whether they have it or not, it needs to be documented what is who owns what, where, when, and why.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly interesting because this brings up another dynamic, and we were talking about cloud service providers and just different, but I know that I've talked to several that are MSPs, and I have found that there is the list of MSPs like you talked about, but I have found that many of them will try to begin to support this, but they will not be certified themselves, pass fail level 2 themselves. And I'm hearing many of them say, well, that's very expensive and we don't need to do that. We're not really touching anything. We're not really doing anything. So from the audit room, what does that look like for you, Eric?
Yeah, so they are right? If they do not store, process, or transmit CUI, they do not, your MSP does not, by the rule, require level 2. Now, it is a great to have. It makes it a lot easier for you as the OSA going down certification. Because remember, if they don't, and first question I ask is, tell me about your SPAs, tell me about your CUI assets. And you might be like, oh, my MSP is an SPA in my environment. I go, oh, awesome. They have a level 2 certification? No. Well, now you've just increased the price a little bit for you, because now I have to go in and assess you, and I don't know what I'm going to get with them. I don't know what tools they're using. I don't know what their infrastructure looks like. We don't know how they're managing things. So now I have to go, yikes, okay, that's okay. We're not going to ding you. Please make sure they have their everything together, because we have seen it where the MSP gets in and they don't have it together, and they could cause a failure for you wholeheartedly. So can your cloud service providers. But we do see it that the MSP, if they don't have their ducks in a row, with or without a certification, can cause you issues. But again, they are not required. That is a real conversation. It is expensive. I don't hate when they say that, but I want an if I'm going to work with an MSP, whether they get a cert or not, I want to know they're taking CMMC seriously, and I want to know they've aligned their organization against 800-171 and validated it somehow. through a mock assessment, through a gap assessment, through a level 2 by a third party. Personally, it just shows good faith that we're not the fox watching the hen house. We've let somebody else do that. And I have a marketing background. I'd market it to the universe. Hey, we've been verified, we've been validated. I would still get your level 2. I think it's a great marketing tool and a great best practice. But I think in short, Valerie, no, they don't need to have it, but they should not be telling people, oh, we're good, you're good, we have it. They need to be vocal and honest of, we do not have it, but here's what we do have. Here's the documentation we do have. And I think that's important too.
That's very important, John.
And even following up on that, I mean, I think that because you've nailed it, you've nailed most everything there. But the alignment of understanding what the controls are and being able to give that advice, or be able to manage things in a way that gives you the confidence that they're managing it. I mean, and that, Eric, that's pretty much what you were saying. But it's a way of, if you just pick a general MSP off the shelf, off the web, right? They're probably not looking at the controls. I mean, they do great things when it comes to the technology and those pieces. If they're going to have access to your CMMC environment, there's more to it. They probably don't test the patches that Microsoft sends out quite as often. They're probably not testing that against what the security pieces. So there's a level that you're looking at when it comes to selecting your providers, and you've got to understand what those are and ask those tough questions, and maybe have a separate set for your CMMC environment if that's the case, because it's probably going to be a bit more than your day-to-day typical person.
And real quick, so I saw Roseanne asked a question. I saw, John, you answered it. And what you just said, I think answers her question, because do you need to know exactly? So like, is the assessor going to ding you if you don't know 3.1.1 subs? Like, no, but know your role. Like John said, whoever, like, it takes a team. If you are the sole person responsible, you need to know, like, it's like running a play. It's like, there's multiple people in the play. You're only knowing your piece of that play. But if you were the only person playing all those roles, you got to know where to stand every single time and when the curtain goes down every time. But instead, if you rely on a team and you have the right team around you, you just need to know where you need to stand in that moment and where you need to move to. They need to know where they need to stand when they're being addressed. And the assessor will, during the pre-assessment phase, they'll start to go through and start to understand who's a part of the assessment, who are the stakeholders we need to interview, what controls and objectives do they manage, and they'll build your calendar for the assessment period around your availability of who's responsible. And if that's your MSP, I better hope my MSP knows what they're talking about and can produce documentation when asked. So the answer in short is yes. But again, they're not, they down to like the .1, .2s. I don't think they're going to ding you, but you better be ready to have the evidence they're asking for when it's your time to produce in that play. And I think that's the way I like to describe it.
Well, and as the CISO, you are the director of the play, right? I mean, you are curtain up, curtain down, and telling people where to go and when to be, and when they're going to be in the spotlight. So yes, the answer. So that's a great way of looking at it. I like that, Eric.
Valerie, I saw there was another question. I don't know. Did we?
It's funny because I didn't see. I didn't see the one that you said that you saw, so I feel really bad.
There's a Q&A and a webinar chat, both. I'm trying to answer both.
I'm on the wrong one. There we go. I'm just having a Friday. Everybody, I'm having a Friday.
It's all good.
Yeah, I believe that there was a question, inheritance versus not, and I think it was back, and we may have already answered that one. And
yeah, I think that was about the MSP conversation, is like, can you inherit their level 2? John, did you want to address that? And I have my own thoughts about that.
Yeah. So the answer is, I mean, well, probably not. I mean, if they are hosting your entire environment, you're even if they're hosting your entire environment, you're not going to be able to just inherit their information. Where what it comes down to is the people that you have, the access controls, the policies, the training, all the things that go into your people That is not the responsibility of the MSP. Therefore, you can't just say, well, they're certified, so I am. There's a lot more that will still have to go into that. Now I've seen some MSPs go, well, we can cover 70 of your controls for you in this, and that's great. You still have the other, 40 controls that you've got to manage. So there is no, well, just look at them. There's no just passing the buck.
Yeah. I would have said, my answer would have been like, no. Can you inherit? No, but probably not as a nicer way of saying it. So I will say this: we were having a conversation today, and this I think we'll address Philip's question too about FedRAMP. So
Yeah,
again,
I
it
was
goes
gonna
back to
say
the
there's
rule.
another one, so
If
let's.
your
Go ahead.
cloud tool stores, processes, or transmits CUI, blanket statement, yes, they need FedRAMP. No questions asked. Period. Hard stop. FedRAMP moderate or FedRAMP moderate equivalency. They're that as long as they have the SAR, the SAP, and all that good stuff, checkbox. If they do not, and they are just a security protection asset, and they're just handling security protection data, technically, no, they don't need to be FedRAMP, right? That it states in the rule. But I think the verbiage is exactly the same as everything else. It says, but they need to show applicable, what's applicable against 800-171 for everything that's applicable that they manage on behalf of you. So they're still required, whether it's you're using some random tool. I mean, if you deem your HR platform in scope, which I don't know why you would, but like if you deem that in scope, but it's not storing, processing, or transmitting CUI, but somehow it's processing security protection data, which again, I don't know why it would, but let's say you've deemed that, the assessor is then going to say, great, then show me how they're meeting, right? So like making sure you're having the conversation with your cloud service provider is so important. Short answer is no, not required, but it is, if you've identified them as a CUI asset, and you've incorrectly identified them, the first thing the assessor is going to go is, do they have FedRAMP? No, fail, done, can't move forward. I need the documentation. We can't accept this, right? So it's really important identifying your assets and having a conversation with your assets and making sure they're taking it seriously. That I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah. So that's a fabulous question. And John, I want you to also answer, because I have seen where it's the equivalent to, right? And that they're following FedRAMP, but they're not FedRAMP. And I have actually heard of other C3POs failing organizations because of that, because they didn't want to put their neck on the line with as an assessor. So going back to my nice little IRS thing, nobody wants to put their neck out on the line to say, yeah, that technically that's the rule. But technically, if you're not comfortable as an assessor, are you really going to let that fly?
No.
No. I'm just gonna say,
I mean,
be
and
FedRAMP.
yeah, I mean, and ultimately what it comes down to is that FedRAMP is, there's a standard for FedRAMP, right? I mean, and to be certified in FedRAMP, it takes time, and you've got to go through the process to show up on the government website to be there. You have to go through that. There's no, oh well, we're waiting for our certification. We're doing this. So we've got the equivalency because we've done something else. And no, if you're not showing up on that website, the C3PAO is going to go, no, that just doesn't do it. So, and they will check. I mean, if you've included it in scope, if you're using a second tool, I mean, Philip just asked a question about the MSP controlling the cloud services. Yeah, if you're utilizing that tool in the MSP environment or in the CMMC environment, then it needs to be FedRAMP ready. I mean, it needs to be FedRAMP certified. So understanding that otherwise they're just they're gonna fail it.
Yeah, let me hold on. Let me understand. So I think I hear. So if the MSP is controlling cloud service tools, which they absolutely do, right? And they provide security to the CMMC environment, the tools need to be FedRAMP. If those tools are storing, processing, or transmitting CUI, yes. If they are not, then it's categorization is really important, and they're just a security protection asset. Technically, they don't. But if they're, again, it's all about how you're categorizing those assets. All about how those assets are handling the information. So I see this all the time. The MSP has 8 or 9 cloud service offerings that wrap around their MSP, and that MSP is then offering a service to you as the OSA, and they're saying, you're going to use these tools. When the assessor comes in, and this is why your price goes up or your scope goes up, I'm going to go, tell me about your environment. Tell me about your ESPs. You're going to go, oh, I use Microsoft GCC High. Oh, awesome. Awesome. Tell me more about that. Oh, do you have an MSP? Oh, yeah, we do. Awesome. Do they have level 2? No. Okay. Or, tell me about their tool suite. Oh, they use ABC and CDE and DDE. How do you classify them? Okay, well, there's a security protection assets. They do not store, process, or transmit CUI. Technically, they don't need FedRAMP, but they still need the same rigor against 800-171. They still need the same, they need to be able to, they're a part of the assessment. So the real question is, I think the real question I'd be asking is like, does my MSP have the right appropriate tools in place that are taking CMMC seriously? If they're FedRAMP, it does make life way easier. I'm not going to lie. FedRAMP makes everything easier. We have assessments where there are FedRAMP approved environments that do kind of support the majority of controls for you. It is way easier for the assessor to go, yeah, no, we validated you. You meet a handful of these. Well, now I only need to verify and validate this versus this now. So there is a real conversation that if your MSP is investing in FedRAMP and tools, your life will just naturally be easier. I can't shy away from that. But is it required? I take that as no, unless they're storing, processing, or transmitting CUI. In that case, hard stop, yes.
Yeah.
John, is that
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I thought that's what you were saying. I just wanted to make sure we were aligned.
Well, and I think Philip had kind of a little bit of a, he said, even if they are categorized as an ESP. So that's at the end of his statement. And this is where at the beginning, I remember a couple of organizations that they did not pass because the vendors themselves stated they were an ESP and then they really weren't. And so that still failed. But finishing Philip's question.
Remember the definition of an ESP is either a cloud service provider or a managed service provider or a managed security service provider. So all of those fit into the definition of an ESP. So if they are a security protection asset or their CUI asset, and they kind of meet those requirements of MSP, MSSP, CSP, and then you are identifying them overarchingly as an ESP, that there's a little box in the rule. It's literally a chart. I think it's literally called an ESP requirement chart. And it verbatim tells you, if you have this, you are required to have this. If you don't, your requirement is this. Next. And it blanket statements it for MSP, MSSP, CSP. And a lot of times when I talk to people as the C3PO on record, because I can't consult with them, and they ask me a question, I pull up the chart and I say, you tell me, take a look at this chart. This is what we're going to live and die by. This is the rules, and this is how we have to follow it. It's now up to you to categorize them appropriately. I cannot tell you how to categorize them. This is against the rules. So yeah, even if they're categorized as an SSP, I guess technically yes, because you have categorized them that way.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we covered Philip's complete question on that. So anyway, yeah, it's kind of been interesting for this. So your recommendations, and I don't see any other questions right now, but if anybody has questions, go ahead and chat them or put your hand up, and we're going to open it to Q&A in about, well, we're already been doing it, but in about 2 minutes. But at the end of the day, Eric, what is one thing that if you could tell this group is the most important thing to think about before heading into your assessment, what would that be?
I mean, I feel like I'm a broken record here, but just validating your external service providers and getting a third party to validate them, whether it's letting the C3PO come in and do a mock assessment or letting an authorized partner that knows their stuff like you guys coming in and validating that work. Just make sure you've got your I's dotted and your T's crossed for every partner who is responsible for every piece of your environment, because everybody's at stake here. There's any given part of any player in that environment, any person in that play can cause the play to go awry. And you want to make sure that everybody has practiced and you've had somebody watch you and film you like in a play and say like, hey, you were a little out of line there. If you were there next time, we're good to go. before you go to the finish line. Because remember, when we do your assessment and you, God forbid, don't pass, or there's a false start, we have to report it. And I hate that conversation. That is not, the role I am in is to not take your money. I want to protect this community. So if you do those things, that one thing, I think that in itself will account for a lot of the missteps that are happening in community.
Thank you. Yeah. And we want you to pass. I mean, that's the whole point. That is the point to protect. So, and John, what is one thing you would advise?
Using the analogy here, stick to the script, right? There is no ad-libbing. This is not the time. If you're asked a specific question, don't be the smartest person in the room. Don't try and snow the auditor. You will not. You will fail. I mean, and what I mean by that is that, if they're asking a specific question about a control, some people just, they're nervous. This is a big thing. So they start talking more than they should be, and then they start bringing in things, and the auditor's listening, and then all of a sudden this thing that you were telling them about becomes part of the scope because of the way that you described it. And you were like, no, it's not really part of the scope. No, sorry. I mean, the way you're using it now, it's now part of the scope. So you've got to be very succinct and stay with the script of what you need to be doing. Here's the control, here's what it is. And if you're asked those questions, take a breath. The auditor will wait a second. They'll wait. They're looking for the right answer, not just an answer. So make sure you're getting them the right answer and staying with the script of what you've documented, what the environment is. You're gonna have to live by that script as you go through it, for the entire time that this enclave or this environment is going. You've got to live with it. So understand it, but just answer the question and then move on.
I'm stealing that. That was well said. I really like
Well
that.
said. So we're going to open it up to Q&A, and I'm going to be the first question person there because I want everybody to pass, and this would be great. But what happens? How long? We already talked about the 200,000 and all that kind of stuff. What happens, heaven forbid, that you do fail? You have to report it. What are the steps afterwards? How long, is there a length of time? I hadn't even thought about that till you said it, Eric.
Well, I think in short, I think the quickest answer to your question, and the thing that is a real reality is, and again, personally, we haven't had many folks, if any, failed, but we've had some false starts, and that's a different process, right? That kind of stalls the process. But I haven't necessarily spoken to the folks in the community that have failed, but from my understanding and what I've heard and what I think is the path is, if you do fail, unfortunately, we have to upload it into EMS. It needs to be reported. You then obviously need to go remediate. I mean, there's a whole step that you have to go back and either work with the same partner or maybe find a new partner to go remediate. That's its own time. Then, depending if you want to come back to the same C3PO or go to a different C3PO, you have to reschedule. I actually don't know if there's a time. That's a great question, and I should know that answer. I don't know if there's a time in between. No, look, I'm the first one to be like, I don't know, because it's such a new thing, and if it's written in the rule, shame on me. But I think the real problem is if you to come back to me and say, like, I'm ready to get reassessed. Hey, I know we weren't perfect. We fixed everything. You got to get back into my queue. We're booking months and months in advance. So that's its own timeline, regardless of if there's a written rule of timeline. And if, John, you know that number, please, much smarter than me. But like, I know that there's an unwritten rule of like, you got to meet my timeline now. My timeline says I'm booking into October, November right now. So if you got assessed today, you got to wait. And if your contract needed it yesterday, then you're behind the 8 ball, and that's on my calendar. That doesn't, not even on the written calendar. John, is there a date, John? I have no
Not
idea.
as far as I know. I mean, you could come back the next day. Yeah, I mean, you could come back the next day and be like, well, I fixed it, but you're still not going to get. I mean, if you're off the schedule for the C3PAO, they've got other people that are waiting, and I don't know, maybe we need to do like a cue sheet that says, if somebody fails or drops out beforehand, then it can move on to the next one, or you can get back in there. But that's up to you, Eric, on how you guys manage that one. But I mean, it's going to be difficult, but no matter what. I mean, if you've been dropped out for some specific reason, sometimes it could be something simple. I could see that, but at the same time, the auditor can't let you fix that at that time. This is not the time to, when you're doing your audit, is not the time to be fixing anything. You're at the script level. Don't be changing lines. You've got to be ready.
And remember, during the assessment, there is like a 10-day grace period. If there's little small findings that you can kind of fix some stuff on the fly. And if you have allowable poems, which, in the rule, it talks about what's allowable and what's not, you have 180 days time bound to go remediate. So like there is some flexibility in the assessments that allow for some time afterwards. And then the assessor would fit you back in and reassess. But those 3 points, those 5-point items, if you miss those and you were able to get past the pre-assessment phase into the assessment and the assessor deems you as failed, there is nothing they can do. I mean, if you could fix it quickly, great, but some of these things are not a quick fix. You can't fix it in 2 days. It might be a 6-month fix. And, God forbid you fail. I did a quick lookup. There is no mandatory waiting period. But again, if you need to go migrate, which again, the assessor could have picked that up on the pre-assessment period of like, maybe you're not in a GovCloud or maybe X, Y, and Z. That there's no way that happens in 5 days. That's a multi-week period that happens. So like you're waiting on to not only implement, again, you're waiting to get back into the queue. So I think the short answer, Valerie, is no mandatory timeline, but yes, there is a unwritten timeline of exactly what John just said of like all this stuff you're going to have to do to build confidence back up to make sure you go back in and pass the next time.
Okay, we have a question from Philip again. Example scenario, if you have an MSP and they have an RMM tool which has capacity for file transfer, but they have policy and or mechanisms showing that is not occurring, are there any recommendations on how this would be justified to satisfy a C3PAO? Question mark.
I'm going to lean on John for this one. Much smarter than me. Because I would have just told you, let's set up a call with my lead CCA. That and here's the thing. I'll give you my answer. It so depends. It is scenario by scenario of like what works and what doesn't. But John, do you have the consulting answer of how this works and why this works?
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to, why is it turned off for this client? How is that policy in place? Is it just for this piece, and the assets? Is there any way that could not be, that policy would not be enabled for certain parts of the organization and enabled on this? It's going to call into question all of those items from the MSP standpoint of how are you going to manage that and understand what is there, to be able to succinctly prove that you can do this. So I think that, as a C3PAO, they're really trying to, they've got a license that they've got on the line for this too. So if you're going at this and saying, well, it has this capability, but I've turned it off, they need to understand how and when it gets turned on and off for every customer or for every environment.
Yeah, I think my answer would be just the documentation is going to be key there to tell them the story. And I think working with the right partner, again, like an Omnistruct, to get you guys ready to be able to prove that to the assessor. The assessor is not out to get you. The assessor is not out there to look for things outside of your scope. But again, if you're telling him or her that this is the case, and then they dig a little deeper, be prepared to show them and be prepared to be able to validate how does that meet the control or the objective. And if they're saying it does not, and here's why, then that's how they deem that to be so. So I would say, I think John's answer was a more in-depth answer of mine, which is it depends, and it's doing your due diligence on the documentation piece to make sure it's the right story for the assessor, and then validating that with a third party that it does actually meet the controls and the objectives. So probably not the ideal answer you were looking for.
Well, it's a there you have it. It depends. Yeah, it's probably best that you do take some pre-assessment, and there's lots of gap assessments out there so that you're getting prep for it, some prep work, and then also having whoever's helping you with the prep work actually kind of take you through a mock assessment and see where the pitfalls are and see, maybe coached on how to stick to the script. And I'm like, yeah. And at the end of the day, it's much much more palatable if you can do that. So we are at the top of our hour. It like flew by partially because I don't know what happened with Zoom, but we were all on different meetings. I want to thank everybody for the questions, and also I'll let Eric tell you how you can get a hold of Control Case, and then I know John Riley has a sign up list also for people who want to wait to get on with a C3PO, which we're partnering with Control Case on some of that as well. So Eric, where can they get a hold of you if they would like to get a hold of you?
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for the Omnistruct team. You guys are awesome. I think that's just plain and simple. So Levitus at controlcase.com, controlcase.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Eric Levitus. We have a queue ourselves we're getting on, right? So, get in early and often with your C3PAOs and any audit and cert partner. So, yep, if you guys are ready, if you're not ready, you're looking at the right people to help you, John and Valerie. If you are ready, come find me. We'd love to talk.
And for me, you can reach me at jriley@omnistruct.com, or if you're looking on LinkedIn, the John Riley. So because there's so many John Rileys, so I'm the John Riley, and look forward to helping you out, getting you through this.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thanks everybody, and
Thanks,
hopefully you have a
guys.
blessed day.
Thank you.
See ya.